Hi, Rich from Colorado Paratech. Today we're looking into the flashlight phenomenon, something that's sweeping the paranormal community. Actually been used for several years as an ITC device, something to communicate with entities. Been looking into these and doing a pretty in-depth study for about a year now, and we're going to talk about some conclusions that we've come up with, and we're going to show the inner workings of the flashlight too. And discuss reasons why they may or may not be actually doing what people think they're doing. So we'll look into that as we go along here. Now, the way people use flashlights to try and communicate with the other side is you take the flashlight and you turn it on and then back it off until it's just barely off. I'll show you how that's done here. Okay, so on a mini mag flashlight, you have to rotate the outer barrel to make it come on. Now, something people don't, and a lot of people don't know about, is these things are designed to be on all the time. The switch is an always on switch. So, what happens is when you roll the sleeve all the way down, then it pushes the connection inside, disconnects from the ground, and turns the flashlight off. So what people do is you turn the flashlight on, then you back it off, so it's just barely in between on and off. And then you set it down, and you hope for a response. You ask questions, is there anybody there? Turn the flashlight on. And hopefully you get a response. If it comes on, you go, ooh, look, there's an entity speaking to me through the flashlight. We don't really know if that's what's going on. But flashlights do come on, they do go off. Now, why is that? Is there something physically turning the sleeve of the flashlight to make it come on? Not really, no, that's not how it works. We'll show you the inner workings of the switch in a minute here. But what's happening is there is an arc between the negative connector of the light bulb, where it plugs into the switch, and the outer sleeve of the flashlight. And look, lo and behold, we have an entity trying to communicate with us. Hi, entity, how are you doing today? Can you turn that flashlight off for me, please? I know you can. Okay. Thank you. Now, can you turn it back on to verify that there is someone in the room with me now? Besides my cat? Okay, now what just happened is I'm in my basement right now, on my little laboratory, and this is pretty sure not a haunted house. Never had any experiences here, never had any kind of confirmed interactions, no strange occurrences, no reason to believe at all that there is a haunting in this house. So what's happened here is a thing called thermodynamics. Yes, it is. That's right. It is thermodynamics. What happens here is as the flashlights cool, the body shrinks just an imperceptible amount. As the body shrinks, it makes the contact between the sleeve and the negative lead of the bulb. That causes the flashlight to come on. Now, as this one has a xenon bulb in it, and those bulbs get very hot. We've measured them up to 120 degrees when they've been on for a while. Now what happens is once that bulb is on, it heats up the core of the flashlight just enough to break that connection again, causing expansion in the switch. Now I'll show you more about how that switch works in just a second. Okay, we're going to disassemble the flashlight now. I guess we'll take the batteries out first. Alright, there's the bulb, batteries out, the switching mechanism. Let's go ahead and take the bulb out. Put it over here so we don't lose it. Okay, pull that part off. And out falls the switch, and that is the inner workings. The bulb fits into the switch like so, As you can see, this is the contact right here. This is your culprit. This is what's causing probably 90% of the flashlight interaction out there. This little switch, and how well you can see it here, but this switch, when the switch is in the on position, the lead from here compresses against the inner portion of the body right here. So I'll put this in here so you can see it. Okay, now so we can hold that in position. Oh, well, you can see this here. Zoom in on this. When this switch is in the off position, it pushes against the back here, disconnecting the inner switch here, or the disconnecting against the inner part of the sleeve. Now, when it's in the on position, this connection is made. Now, generally, when you what happens when you loosen it just enough to where it's barely off, you really can't see it, unfortunately. But the little copper connection in there, excuse me, the little copper connection in there is just barely touching the inside of the sleeve here. So there's a micro gap in between the connection, the lead, the negative lead, the copper connector, and the inside of the sleeve. Now, what happens is this thing is close enough that it can still make an electrical arc. Electrons can still jump from the power source, the battery, through the bulb to the sleeve, making the connection. There has to be a large enough gap for that not to happen. Now, as temperatures change, this can make the connection for you. And even when you're in a stable temperature, for the reference, this basement is about 65 degrees right now, because we left the heat off last night. But when the temperature is stable, even in room temperature, normal, say, summer weather in the 70s, 80s, this can still happen, not because of temperature, but just because the gap is so slim between the connector and the sleeve that electrons still jump. They still flow across and make the connection. So you have to be aware of that. Unfortunately, it's looking like not every one of these flashlight communications is real. A large percentage of them are just a function of proximity. They're a function of temperature. It's a function of electricity. It's not necessarily entities making these things come on all the time. Now, I'm not going to say that's 100% true, because we don't know. There still might be some interaction. Sometimes there seems to be intelligent response. But on the other hand, our mind makes up a lot of things too. So to try and fill in gaps, it's very common to assume something is happening when you don't really know what everything is going on. Anyway, so we don't know for sure that it's entities. We can't say for sure that it's entities. So basically, my group has decided not to use these flashlights anymore, or any standard flashlights that you can loosen any part of the body to make the connection break just enough where it will go on and off intermittently. We've designed something called a non-switching flashlight, which I'll show you in a minute here. It's very crude, but it's very effective. Once again, you see the connector here. Hopefully you can see that connector. That's the switch. That's the part that makes the connection right there. That's the part that's the culprit. As you can see, there's a little gap here. Right here, and this thing is actually pushed away from the body, and it acts as a spring. It's meant to compress so that when you push it up, it makes a connection like that. Now, again, the problem with this is not any set defined switch. I mean, it's strictly a pressure switch. So it's meant to hit the inside of this and make the connection to the body. That makes the negative connection to the back of the battery, completes the circuit, your light comes on. Unfortunately, because of that, and because we accurately measure the distance between this switch and the inside of the flashlight when it's in position, there is no way to verify what's going on. So we're having to throw out everything we've done with these because we don't know for sure. Because of this switch, we don't know if our data is real or not, if it's valid. So we're going to start doing testing with the new non-switching flashlight, which we have already started. and see if we can determine A, if there's something going on paranormal, B, exactly what distance it takes between switches, or between connecting mechanisms to complete a switch, to cause an event to occur, and start doing calculations on those and do replications. We're going to do several thousand of these until we can get some sort of formula to determine A, at what distance electrons will jump across the connection in a natural state caused by nothing paranormal, and B, if beyond that point these things can still come on and be made to come on by something other than forces of nature. So we'll get back to that in just a second. Get back together, and I can show you here. Basically, that's the function here. Okay, take that off. That power back on. See, this breaks connection when you screw the sleeve down on it. Now, we've also made LED versions of these to see if there's any difference. And really not much difference. They pretty much perform the same. Okay. And there you go. So unfortunately, your switch is the problem on these. So we're not going to use these anymore. I'll show you what we are using now. Okay, so to recap here, the Mini Mag has many problems with it, or mag flashlights in general. Now, I know this is going to be unpopular with a lot of people, but unfortunately there are problems with using standard flashlights as a ITC device. The switch cannot be set. It's virtually impossible to set the switch identically every time. So there's no way to know if it's the position of the switch or not that's making the effect happen. Now, I will say that it doesn't have to be a Mini Mag flashlight. One of the very first ones we ever used was a cheap plastic flashlight like this, and it did indeed also get flashes on and off, but the same kind of switching device. It switches down to connect to the battery, and so again, we don't know. We cannot replicate the switch, so the switching mechanism. So it's not valid. We cannot call it a valid response. Now, because of that, enter the non-switching flashlight. This is a very crude example, but this is our first attempt at this. And what we've done is taken a very ordinary, cheap dime store flashlight, and it's plastic body, and we've broken the switch essentially. Made the switch external. The connections are external. It's mounted in a specific position that we can replicate every time, and we have made the connector a screw connector. So basically, you don't even have to use a screwdriver with this one, but I'll do it for demonstration purposes. The flashlight will not come on unless there is a bridge in the gap between the two connectors, or the positive and the negative lines. Now, also, we've removed the spring from internally. We want no moving parts, no metal parts, anything that could be affected by temperature. So we've taken out the spring that holds the battery in place at the bottom here, and substituted a thick rubber material to put the battery in position to make the connection. This way, temperature does not affect it. It won't expand or contract sufficiently to make or break a connection. So now, another thing is we've gotten ordinary automotive feeler gauges here, and we can actually determine each setting. Every time we set it to a specific position, we can mark down and catalog each position of the switch. We can get it in the same position every time, so that we know what kind of gaps are involved and start finding out where the connections are being made. Now, initially, the smallest one on this one is a 0.038 millimeter. which is very, very thin. You can see it. This is actually thinner than most computer paper is, that you're probably familiar with, printer paper. It's 0.0015 inches. So in other words, that's 1/1.5 thousandths of an inch. So it's so tiny, it's almost not metal. It flexes like paper. It's like film. And I can set this connector here. This is the first setting we've been using, the smallest setting we could find. Okay. Well, right. So now that is set at 0.038 millimeters. That's a very close setting. Now, I'm going to say at our first trial, so far no responses, hasn't come on. Now we're going to keep working with this, and I'm not going to tell you what happens, but if we get something interesting, we will post it until we've got enough data to come up with a reasonable conclusion on the flashlight phenomena. And so we would urge other groups to start making something like this. Now we can make finer looking boxes and that sort of thing, so it looks more aesthetically pleasing. But for the first one, I wanted to use something that resembles a flashlight, just in case there is some kind of entity involvement, and in case entities know the difference between a flashlight and a square plastic box. So this is a flashlight, something that looks like a flashlight. Should be familiar to any kind of organism out there that's using these devices to communicate. So let's see if some of the other groups can come up with this. I'd like to see as many people possible as trying to use something like this rather than a normal flashlight, because you just can't trust the results. You don't know for sure. There's no way to tell for sure what's actually going on with the flashlight. With something like this, something that you can measure the switch gap, replicate it every time exactly, something like this, you can get hard data. So let's try using these, people. Everybody start making something like this. Use it in the field, correlate your results, share it with other groups, and let's try and get a better knowledge, a better view of what's going on with this whole flashlight thing. Is it real? Is it not? Is it sometimes real? Is it not? We don't know. But the better data we get, the more likely we'll find out. Just using random mag lights and store-bought flashlights without modifying them, there's a good chance that we'll never know. So this is Rich from Colorado Paratech signing out for now. See you soon.